Chapter 31, Soon. The little store will be teeming with customers. The scene was oddly quiet. Ji Changsu looked at the slightly adorable Whitey in astonishment. This iron puppet's strength was contrary to his expectations. A fifth-grade battle king was troublesome to deal with even for him, yet this Whitey was able to strip a battle king and throw him out of the store. The third prince did not expect Bu Fang to be that calm either. The sword had almost reached Bu Fang, but he managed to remain indifferent. Did he really have that much faith in that puppet? The remaining three assassins also recovered from their shock and looked at Whitey as if they were facing their greatest enemy. They did not dare to underestimate Bu Fang any longer. There was no other reason for it aside from the fact that the puppet was able to beat their comrade half to death with 2 punches. There's a mistake with the information. There's something strange with this store. The 3 assassins looked at each other and their eyes underneath the bamboo hats were extremely serious. Without question, their assassination had failed. As an assassin, if their first strike had failed, they should immediately retreat and look for another opportunity. That was why they gave up on assassinating Ji Changsu and ran to the entrance of the store. However, how could the 3 of them escape when they were already targeted by Whitey? The 3 escaping figures were captured by a gigantic force and pulled in front of the iron puppet. Whitey's mechanical eyes were blinking as it threw out 3 palm strikes in a row. The 3 of them each spat out a mouthful of blood and fell onto the floor. The bamboo hats on their heads were all torn to pieces as they helplessly lay there. The sound of tearing rang out, then the 3 assassins were thrown out naked like the first one. They fell into the alleyway with only a small cloth to cover their private parts. It was still raining heavily outside. Raindrops spilled down from the sky and rapidly formed a curtain that enshrouded the world. After completing everything, Whitey mechanically made a fist pump. Then its mechanical eyes flashed and it seemed quite happy as it returned to the kitchen. The coldness in Ji Changsu's eyes gradually disappeared and they once again returned to their former refined state. The corner of his mouth held a hint of a smile as he meaningfully looked at Bu Fang. He suddenly realized that he was unable to see through this cook, who was only a second-grade battle master. "What do you want to order?" Bu Fang ignored Ji Changsu's gaze and expressionlessly asked. "I'll have Lee's fish. Today, I am lucky that owner Bu is around to lend a hand. I wanted to drink in celebration but since there's no wine sold here, I can only order Lee's fish." The third prince, Ji Changsu, chuckled and nodded toward Bu Fang. If it was not for Whitey's help, then it would have been really dangerous for him. Even he did not expect that they would be so deranged as to openly attack him within the imperial city. "There will be good wine for sale in a few days, but there really isn't any today," Bu Fang simply said as he headed toward the kitchen. Along the way, he gently patted Duang Zioyi, who was still dumbstruck, on the head. "Oh? There's going to be wine?" Ji Changsu's eyes lit up, then his smile became brighter as he meaningfully glanced at the slim figure of Bu Fang entering the kitchen. "Zioyi, I'll be going out for a while. Make sure to keep the Lee's fish for me when it's done," Ji Changsu said to Uang Zioyi, who was still in a daze, as he slowly walked toward the entrance. "Oh, eh? Why are you going out?" Uang Zioyi blankly asked. However, Ji Changsu did not answer her and just stepped out of the store. Just by taking a single step, the expression on Ji Changsu's face suddenly changed. The gentle and refined smile disappeared and was replaced by a bone-chilling killing intent. He opened his umbrella to block out the curtain of rain falling from the sky. The rainwater splashed onto his shoes and soaked his clothes. Within the alleyway, the 4 assassins stood up with difficulty. They were almost unable to open their eyes with the heavy rain spraying into them. Within the fog, they seemed to see a refined figure holding an oil paper umbrella. Then their line of sight suddenly froze as their eyes widened. Ji Changsu returned to the store and stepped into its warm interior once more. He blew into his hands and rubbed them together to disperse some of the coldness in his body. He shook off the rainwater on his robes as a gentle and refined smile reappeared on his face. "Zioyi, "Is the lease fish ready?" Ouyang Xiaoyi blinked and said, "It's not, but I can already smell the wine aroma. It should be ready soon." Ji Changsu nodded and returned to his seat. At his feet, rainwater with a reddish tinge slowly dripped off from the bottom of his robes. Ouyang Xiaoyi stared at the reddish puddle of water for a while without saying anything. The third prince did not say anything either. He closed his eyes and rested, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, a rich wine aroma drifted out of the kitchen and hovered within the store, washing away any residual killing intent. Ouyang Xiaoyi wobbled as she carried out the plate of lease fish. Along the way, the fragrance continuously drifted out from the plate. She used a handkerchief to block her nostrils and forced herself not to breathe in the smell. She was staring at the lease fish as she placed it in front of Ji Changsu. "Your Highness, big brother, here's your fish," Ouyang Xiaoyi said with a nasal voice. "Haha, it's finally done. I was really craving this lease fish. In the entire empire, I admire Owner Bu's culinary skills the most." Ji Changsu chuckled while patting Ouyang Xiaoyi's head. Bu Feng walked out of the kitchen as well. He carried out a bowl of fragrant egg-fried rice and placed it opposite to Ji Changsu's seat. He pointed toward it and said to Ouyang Xiaoyi, "Here's your breakfast." Ouyang Xiaoyi, who was still shocked from the assassination attempt, immediately calmed down. Her eyes lit up as she sat on the chair and started to gobble down the egg-fried rice. Ji Changsu's way of eating was very elegant. It was obvious that he was very self-disciplined. "Owner Bu, do you really have no interest in becoming the imperial chef? With your culinary skills, you can definitely become the head chef of the imperial kitchen." Ji Changsu tried to persuade him once more. "I am not interested in becoming anyone's chef. If the emperor wishes to eat my dishes, then get him to personally queue up," Bu Feng indifferently replied. He said as if it was obvious and was not being pretentious about it. "With Owner Bu's skills, it's a waste of your talent to stay here. If you would enter the imperial kitchen, you would surely be able to display your talents," Ji Changsu said with a sigh. "Who said that I can't display my talents within this alleyway? I believe that it won't be long before this place is teeming with customers," Bu Feng seriously and confidently said. Ji Changsu was slightly startled by Bu Feng's reply. He subconsciously said, "That's not possible. With the prices of your dishes, ordinary people wouldn't be able to afford it." "No, it's not that they can't afford it. It's that they can't eat it. You should understand the reason why my dishes are valuable," Bu Feng simply said. Whether it was the ordinary egg-fried rice or the improved version, lease fish or the fish head tofu soup, the ingredients chosen were all from valuable spirit beasts and spirit herbs that were filled with spirit energy. Spirit beasts were originally valuable because they were difficult to capture. Using them as ingredients for food was unbelievable. Spirit herbs were difficult to obtain and were usually used to make elixirs. Bu Feng's dishes managed to preserve most of the spirit energy from the ingredients. Eating one of his dishes was like eating an elixir and would help in cultivation. This was the reason why his dishes were valuable and a fact that Ji Changsu and the rest had neglected. Bu Feng felt that he needed to remind this foolish child. Ji Changsu was picking up a piece of fish with his chopsticks but suddenly stopped and his pupils constricted. He was extremely shocked, as if his heart was struck by a giant rock. That was right. Since he had become a 5th-grade battle king, he needed an extremely large amount of spirit energy to break through to the next level. Bu Feng's dishes were unable to help him in that. He only came on a daily basis because of the taste of the dishes. However, after Bu Feng's reminder, he realized that the dishes may only have a minuscule effect on him due to his cultivation level. However, it was different for the other cultivators who were only battle maniacs and battle spirits. Also, I need to remind you. In the future, there will be more and more dishes. The ingredients chosen will also be more and more powerful. Bu Feng slowly said. There might be a chance for the meat of a 9th-grade sacred beast to appear. Chapter 32, Fang Fang's little store is going to be popular. The meat of a 9th-grade sacred beast? The corner of Ji Changsu's mouth twitched as he looked toward Bu Fang, whose face was currently filled with mystery. If his view of Bu Fang had not changed due to the incident that happened earlier, he would think that Bu Fang was someone with intellectual disabilities. What was a sacred beast? Within the entire Light Wind Empire, the strongest person that he knew was the #1 great general of the empire, Zhou Meng. However, the great Zhou Meng who made the experts from the surrounding sects despair was only a 7th grade battle saint. For the mere owner of a store, who was only a battle master, within the remote alleyways of the capital to mention the meat of a sacred beast. Ji Changsu had no idea of how strong a sacred beast was, but he could use General Zhou Meng as a comparison. A single sacred beast should be worth at least a few dozen General Zhou Meng. A single General Zhou Meng was able to dominate over a few hundred experts from the sects. A few dozen General Zhou Meng could probably destroy the imperial palace with a wave of their hand. Owner Bu really likes to joke around. I've been to many places but I've never heard of any news of 9th grade sacred beasts, Ji Changsu said, while faintly smiling as he finished the lee's fish. Bu Fang did not reply. He understood that Ji Changsu did not believe him. However, he was not perturbed. It was natural for Ji Changsu not to believe. After all, a sacred beast was far too terrifying. Actually, the higher the grade of the spirit beast, the better will be the quality of their meat. They are like natural ingredients of the highest grade. If your highness were to obtain any good ingredients, you could bring them to the store and I will help you cook them, Bu Fang seriously said. The system had already risen to 2 stars and he was able to cook ingredients brought by the customers. That was why he decided to remind Ji Changsu. Oh? I can bring my own ingredients? This seems slightly interesting. Ji Changsu's eyes lit up and he nodded. Outside, the rain had gradually come to a stop. The dark clouds were slowly dispersing, unveiling countless rays of warm sunlight. Ji Changsu stood up and handed over 20 crystals from a sachet to Bu Fang. Then he rubbed the head of Ouyang Zioyi, who was still gobbling down the egg fried rice, and left the store while carrying his oil paper umbrella. After the rain, puddles of water had accumulated on the quartzite floor of the alleyway. Green moss looked as if it was stretching while rainwater slowly dripped from the walls that were still wet. The big black dog was still lying at the entrance as it sleepily yawned. Even after the rain, the fur on its body remained soft and shiny, without a single trace of wetness. Within the majestic imperial palace, row upon row of buildings were orderly built. Troops of armor-wearing guards were patrolling with grim expressions. They were not weak, the weakest among them was a 3rd-grade battle maniac, while the leader of one of the troops was a 5th-grade battle king. Ji Changsu had returned to the palace. The leader of the patrol respectfully saluted when they spotted him and he indifferently nodded in their direction. Passing through the entrance of the imperial palace, he arrived at the vast and wide gate of Heavenly Mystery Square. There were 6 stone pillars erected on the plaza, and carved upon each of them were unusual images of strange beasts and rare treasures. Ji Changsu was standing in front of the gate of Heavenly Mystery and looking at the wide plaza with a complicated expression. He took in a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air after rain. The palace of the Crown Prince was situated behind the gate of Heavenly Mystery. After passing through the gate of Heavenly Mystery, a few dozen meters away to the left of the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace was the Palace of the Crown Prince. With golden bricks and red tiles, it was magnificently and luxuriously built. Your Imperial Highness. According to our spies, there was an assassination attempt on the 3rd prince in a restaurant within the Imperial City, a middle-aged man with an impressive beard said, while holding a message in his hand, toward a seated young man within the palace of the Crown Prince. The young man was dressed in a golden python robe and had a purple crown too, on his head. He had a pale face and long, narrow dashing eyebrows. His eyes were slightly tilted like a sharp blade, giving off a demonic yet dignified aura. Oh? Is he dead yet? The man simply asked. The first thing he asked was the fate of Ji Changsu. No. The 3rd prince spent a long time battling the sects outside our border. With his combat experience, mere assassins wouldn't be able to kill him. The refined middle-aged man laughed as he stroked his beard. Those who would dare to assassinate Third Brother would at least be battle kings, and Third Brother would definitely be injured. However, if he was injured, then the entire Imperial City would know about it. If Father knew about it as well, the current state wouldn't be this peaceful. The Crown Prince opened his eyes, revealing dark and deep pupils. The third prince is indeed unharmed. That's strange. Could it be that an expert aided him? The middle-aged man pondered. Xushi, isn't Third Brother constantly going to that restaurant in the alleyway these days? Is there anything abnormal about that restaurant? Did you send anyone to investigate? The Crown Prince asked. Your Highness. There's something weird with that restaurant, that middle-aged man called Xushi strangely said. How is it weird? That restaurant is the black-hearted little store from the rumors circulating within the Imperial City. A bowl of egg-fried rice costs 10 crystals. A bowl of dry mixed noodles costs 100 gold coins. The most expensive dish is the lees fish, which costs 20 crystals. They really are astronomical dishes. Xushi had a weird expression on his face. It truly is an astronomical price. Third Brother has actually fallen in love with this black-hearted little store? It seems that there is definitely something about that store that no one knows about. Xushi, find an opportunity to visit that store. The corner of the Crown Prince's mouth curled up with interest. There's 2 more days until Great General Zhou Meng triumphantly returns to the Imperial City. The Great General Zhou Meng is truly incredible. He defeated the heterodox sect, Death Soul Palace, in one fell swoop and even captured their 6 leaders. With this, the morale of the sects will surely suffer. This truly is the fortune of Lightwind Empire. The Crown Prince stood up and slowly paced around while sighing. If I wish to secure my position as the Crown Prince or even become the Emperor, I will definitely need the support of Great General Zhou. Your Highness, the sects are showing signs of uprising these past few years. Since His Majesty sent General Zhou to conquer the sects, I am afraid that Zhou Meng has become a thorn in their sides. He would surely be obstructed by the sects as he escorted the prisoners into the Imperial City. There has recently been some movements occurring within the Imperial City. According to our spies, experts from the 5 great Orthodox sects and the 3 great heterodox sects have already infiltrated into the Imperial City, Xushi said with a frown. Unrest? It's better when there's unrest. There are some things that are easier to do when there's unrest. Isn't that what my second brother is thinking? Otherwise, why would he send assassins after Third Brother? However, he probably did not anticipate that Third Brother would return without any injuries. The Crown Prince chuckled with his hands behind his back as he looked into a distance. Xushi was stunned and did not say anything else. He was only an advisor, he would only speak when he should speak and would remain silent when he should not speak. It's fine, I already know about Third Brother's matter. I am not worried about him. The one that I am concerned about is Second Brother. However, there's indeed something strange with the assassination this time. Send someone. No, you should personally visit that black-hearted little store. That store is indeed quite interesting, the Crown Prince said. Xushi nodded, then withdrew after performing a fist and palm salute. King Yu's manner. The second prince, Ji Chengyu, expressionlessly destroyed the letter in his hand. A mere restaurant dares to obstruct me. It looks like there's a need to visit this restaurant. I'd like see who's hiding inside that would actually dare to kill 4 of my 5th grade Battle King assassins, King Yu coldly said. Within an hour of the third prince's assassination attempt, the higher-ranking officials and influential factions within the Imperial City had received the news. Whether it was the Zhou Manor or the Yuing Manor, they were shocked by the news. An assassination attempt on a prince was not a small matter. Naturally, other than the fact that there was an assassination attempt on the prince, Fang Fang's little store had entered the line of sight of these bigwigs as well. Many of them were extremely curious about the store that sold a bowl of egg-fried rice for 10 crystals. Consequently, various factions sent out their men to visit the store. At that moment, The owner of that store was leisurely curled up on a chair. The warm sunlight after the rain was enveloping his body, causing him to comfortably yawn. He may not know it yet, but a huge group of bigwigs was approaching. 1. Python robe. Gourmet was a robe worn by court officials in the past, named for the python sewn on it. 2. Purple crown. Gourmet was also known as Crown Prince helm. It was generally worn by princes and young generals. Chapter 33. Very well, you have been blacklisted. Welcome to Bufang's little store. The menu is on the wall. Tell me when you've decided on your order. As Xushi stepped into the store, a likable voice rang out. An adorable Lali was staring at him while blinking her eyes. The young lady from the Yuang family? Xushi raised his eyebrows and was slightly surprised. Even though the intelligence from his spies had already mentioned Yuang Zioi's presence, he was still amazed when he actually saw her. Why would the princess of the Yuang family actually demean herself by becoming a waitress of this little store? Did she become stupid? At the entrance, a slim and tall young man wearing a chef's uniform slowly got up. He was cracking his neck as he lazily walked toward the kitchen. That's the owner of this store? His cultivation level is really low. How is it possible that he's only a second-grade battle master? To be able to kill 4 Battle King assassins, he should at least be a 6th-grade battle emperor. Xushi thought as he stroked his beautiful, long beard while staring at Bufang's back in astonishment. Hey, what are you ordering? Yuang Zioi unhappily asked. She was annoyed that this old fellow was not paying attention to an adorable Lali like her and was staring at the smelly boss instead. Was her adorable charm inferior to that of smelly boss? Xushi awkwardly smiled as he turned his attention back to her and looked toward the menu on the wall. With this look, his pupils suddenly constricted. The rumors were true. The #1 shady store in the Imperial City is indeed true to its name. Xushi sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered to himself. Even though he was following the Crown Prince's orders to investigate this store, he was still bewildered when he saw the astronomical prices on the menu. I'll have fish head tofu soup. Xushi was not someone who lacked money. He glanced through the menu and selected his favorite one, the fish head tofu soup. Please wait a moment. The little Lali snorted and headed toward the kitchen. She did not like this old fellow that paid more attention to the smelly boss than to her. Xushi found a seat and sat down. The store was not big and there were 4 tables. It was cozy and compact, while the environment was quiet and clean. The overall feeling that it gave customers was good. Da-da-da. A series of footsteps came from outside. Several people approached from a distance and stepped into the store. Xushi? A voice slightly exclaimed. Xushi was puzzled as he turned toward the entrance and saw a middle-aged man. Great Secretariat Su, I didn't expect to see you here. Xushi stood up in surprise and did a fist and palm salute while slightly bowing. The middle-aged man in front of him was the Great Secretariat from the Imperial Court. Xushi was shocked that such a person would personally come to this little restaurant. Even though the Light Wind Empire was a martial country, there were still civil servants. After all, considering both martial and civil aspects was the true way of governing a country. Su Yuanqing recognized the man with the beautiful, long beard in front of him. Xushi, the favorite person of the Crown Prince, was well known within the Imperial Court. Since Su Yuanqing and Xushi were not familiar with each other, they took separate seats after exchanging greetings. Su Yuanqing ordered egg fried rice. Bufang was already busy cooking in the kitchen. It seems that there's a lot of new customers today. What's going on? Could it be that someone within the Imperial City is helping to advertise the store? Even though Bufang was puzzled, his hands did not stop. He scooped up a 3rd-grade thunder silver carp and started to remove the scales. After the intestines were discarded, he rinsed the fish with water and chopped off the head. Keeping the head, the rest of the fish was thrown into Whitey's stomach area to be recycled. Then Bufang took out the sparkling ice crystal jade tofu from the freezer and began to cook the fish head tofu soup. While the fish head tofu soup was being simmered, Bufang took out a white egg that was as big as his fist from the freezer. It was the first egg laid by a 5th-grade deep-sea full eagle and was rich with spirit energy. Bufang heavily tapped it against a blue and white porcelain bowl and managed to crack the egg into the bowl with one hand. While he was preparing the dishes, Fang Fang's little store was already packed with people. "I'll have the egg fried rice. Give me the dry mixed noodles. And hurry up. I want the least fish." Watching as the customers squeezed into the store, Ouyang Zioyi was slightly dumbfounded. When did this store of ours become so popular? She counted at least a dozen customers. Oh my heavens! Is this really the store that was completed deserted a few days ago? Everyone, calm down. There's too many people, so queue up first, Ouyang Zioyi loudly said. There was nothing else she could do. Since it was really inconvenient for the customers to squeeze into the store, she had to make them queue up. The space within the store was too small. Queue up? Little girl, do you know who I am? I am the housekeeper of Lord Zhang. How dare you make me queue up? Hurry up and let your boss serve me my food, a middle-aged man wearing a silk robe unhappily scolded Ouyang Zioyi. So what if you're the housekeeper of Lord Zhang? Little girl, do you know who I am? I am the main housekeeper of the director of the Board of Rights. Is a housekeeper of the director of the Board of Rights that impressive? I am the personal bodyguard of King Mu. Ouyang Zioyi expressionlessly looked on as the group of customers endlessly quarreled. Every one of them had self-important expressions on their faces. Even though the Lilai was amazed that the subordinates of the bigwigs would come to eat at a store located in an alleyway, she was very upset about how pompous they were. Xushi lightly shook his head as he listened to the argument behind him and thought that it was quite ridiculous. He clearly understood the reason why this group of people was there because they had the same objective as him. It was laughable that the crowd actually did not recognize the identity of the girl and wanted to jump the queue by announcing their background. Among these people, the waitress was the one with the scariest background. However, he could not be bothered to point it out to them. Just then, a rich fragrance drifted out of the kitchen. The smell was like a piece of silk rubbing across their cheeks. Everyone within the dining area went into a daze as they subconsciously breathed in the fragrance. The eyes of both Suyu Onking and Xushi lit up. The smell was very fragrant. There was a reason why the price was so high. Bufang was carrying the egg fried rice out of the kitchen when he saw the crowded situation in the dining area. He was stunned for a moment and was slightly unable to accept the fact that the store suddenly became popular. However, he remained calm and the astonishment only lasted for an instant before he became expressionless once more. Everyone has to queue up accordingly. Each customer can only order each dish once. Takeout is not allowed. Cutting in line is not allowed. Anyone who violates the rules will be blacklisted and service will no longer be provided to them, Bufang simply said. His voice was not loud but was able to overwhelm the noise. Then, within an instant, the entire store erupted into an uproar. These people were sent by their masters to investigate the store. They were used to lording over others outside, so how could they tolerate so many rules from a tiny store like this? They instantly started to clamor. Bufang expressionlessly placed the egg fried rice in front of Suyu Onking. Here's your improved egg fried rice, please enjoy your meal, Bufang said. Suyu Onking's sight was already attracted by the egg fried rice. He nodded and no longer paid any attention to Bufang. Be quiet. Don't make such a racket. Bufang coldly shouted while frowning. Gosh, darn it. You brat, don't push your luck. I am giving you face by eating here. I am the subordinate of Lord Zhang. I am not someone you can afford to offend. The housekeeper angrily scolded while pointing at Bufang. The others were also pointing at Bufang while indignantly swearing. The store that was quiet for a moment became noisy once more. Ouyang Zioyi rolled her eyes and then saw the irritable expression on Bufang's face. She suddenly decided to silently observe these people for a moment. Of all the places they could act conceited in, they had to come to Fang Fang's little store. With a series of mechanical sounds, Whitey's gigantic figure appeared behind Bu Fang with its mechanical eyes flashing. "Oh my! Do you think that you're invincible just because you have an iron puppet? Is this where your confidence is coming from?" When the housekeeper saw Whitey, he was amused for a moment. He had seen plenty of puppets before and knew that they were all just a bunch of junk. Bu Fang narrowed his eyes and pointed toward the housekeeper of Lord Zhang. "Very well, you've been blacklisted." Chapter 34, If you double the price again, I will definitely beat you up. "You're going to blacklist me? A lowly cook like you?" Lord Zhang's housekeeper was startled by Bu Fang's actions and started to laugh out loud. He was laughing so much that tears were almost coming out. The people around them could not help but snicker as they looked at Bu Fang with ridicule and contempt in their eyes. Was this young cook an idiot? Did he not know who he was speaking to? That was the housekeeper of Lord Zhang. Lord Zhang was a noble and renowned bigwig within the imperial city, and his housekeeper was naturally well known as well. For the cook of a little restaurant located within an alleyway to shamelessly boast that he would blacklist the housekeeper of Lord Zhang, it was the biggest joke in history. "Do you know how easy it is for me to tear down this restaurant? The fact that I am eating here is giving you face. You should be happily serving my food to me. Who gave you the courage to be conceited in front of me?" The housekeeper snorted while haughtily crossing his arms. Bu Fang was expressionlessly looking at the housekeeper as if he was looking at an idiot. "Housekeeper? Is that something impressive? Even a prince was rejected by me. Do you think I would care about a housekeeper?" Bu Fang did not even bother to reply and just lightly patted Whitey's wide belly. Ouyang Zioi's eyes lit up and she was overjoyed to see Whitey in action again. Whitey's mechanical eyes suddenly lit up and flashed red as it mechanically said, "Troublemaker, you will be stripped as an example to others." Lord Zhang's housekeeper was startled. Putting his hand over his ear, he stretched out his neck and taunted, "What? What are you going to strip? Say it again, what are you going to strip?" Whitey's mechanical head slightly rotated and locked on the housekeeper. Its mechanical arms instantly reached out and grabbed him. HMPH. How impudent! Lord Zhang's housekeeper coldly snorted with a sullen expression. As a third-grade battle maniac, there was no way that he would be afraid of a piece of junk that did not even have the slightest spirit energy. "I will turn you into scrap metal. Take this, bone-breaking palm." With a loud shout, the housekeeper imposingly gathered true energy within his body and struck Whitey's mechanical arm with his palm. Bang! The result was very different from his expectations. The fierce palm strike by Lord Zhang's housekeeper was like a drop in the ocean as it made contact with Whitey's arm. Whitey did not even budge from the attack. Gosh, darn it! The housekeeper's body stiffened as he awkwardly raised his head and made eye contact with Whitey's mechanical eyes. Then, Whitey proceeded to slap the housekeeper into the ground like it was slapping a fly. The true energy within his body was dispersed in an instant. The sound of cloth tearing rang out as the housekeeper's clothes were being torn off. After there was only a loincloth left to cover his private parts, he was then thrown out of the store in a parabolic arc. Everyone in the store was dumbfounded while their eyes were transfixed by the housekeeper's body. As they watched it sail through the air, their entire bodies shuddered. Joe Rouge only just arrived at the entrance when a human figure flew out of the store and landed at his feet. For some reason, there was a sense of déjà vu about the situation. It seemed that every time he went to the store, there would be someone flying out naked. "I'll say it again, queue up accordingly and do not make any noise. Any violators will be blacklisted," Bu Fang simply said as he swept his eyes over the now silent crowd. Then he turned around and returned to the kitchen. Ouyang Zioi was standing behind him with her fist clenched. "The smelly boss is really impressive." Joe Rouge shuddered as he recalled his previous nude streaking experience. His original intention to jump queue disappeared as well, and he obediently lined up at the back of the queue. When the Minister of the Left, Joe Mushing, found out that there was an attempted assassination on the third prince, he sent out his son, Joe Rouge, to investigate the store. In the beginning, Joe Rouge flatly refused. However, when his father promised him a 5th-grade spirit-gathering bill as a reward, he shamefully compromised. Xushi was gravely staring at Whitey. Even a 5th-grade battle king like him felt a slight pressure from it. This puppet isn't simple. Great Secretariat Suyu Ongking was pensively nodding his head as well. This must be the hidden expert of this restaurant. The two of them looked up and smiled at each other. Then, they lowered their heads and continued to gobble down the food. It was simply too good. Intimidated by Whitey, the subordinates of the bigwigs were much more docile. The cultivation level of Lord Zhang's housekeeper was considered quite strong among them. However, he was still helplessly stripped naked by Whitey. Without a doubt, they would only end up the same way if they tried anything. They could only be docile if they did not want to end up naked. Ouyang Zioyi haughtily glanced at them as she memorized their orders and reported them to Bufang. Zishu and Great Secretariat Su reluctantly finished their food with enraptured expressions. There was a reason for the expensive prices of the dishes. The taste was even better than food from the imperial kitchen. Also, the two of them could feel the true energy within their body had increased. It was obvious that the dishes were extraordinary. As they hurriedly left the store, the people at the start of the queue took their seats. Bufang's cooking speed was fast as well, so they did not have to wait for too long. Without a doubt, everyone who tasted Bufang's dishes was completely subdued. Joe Rouge's appetite was being triggered as he breathed in the fragrance drifting from the store and watched the customers, that had finished eating, reluctantly leave. It was his third time coming to the store, but he was unable to taste the dishes the previous times. From the looks of it, they seemed pretty good. He was looking forward to trying them out. When someone satisfactorily left the store, a joyful expression immediately appeared on Joe Rouge's face. He elegantly walked into the store and gracefully stopped in front of Ouyang Zioyi. "Oh, it's you, Sissy Joe?" Ouyang Zioyi looked up and said while pouting. She obviously knew Joe Rouge. For the princess of Ouyang family to humbly become a waitress, what a waste. "TSK, TSK, TSK. I'll have Lee's fish," Joe Rouge ordered after glancing at the menu. If he had to eat, he would eat the most expensive dish. "That's none of your concern." Ouyang Zioyi snorted while scrunching her nose. She turned around and walked to the entrance of the kitchen to report the order. However, before she could shout it out, Bufang expressionlessly walked out of the kitchen. "Today's business hours is over. Customers who haven't eaten, come back tomorrow," Bufang simply said. With his words, the 8 people in the queue started to clamor. "What? We've already waited for close to an hour and you're telling us that you're not cooking anymore? Owner Bu, this is unfair to us. It's still early, so you should continue cooking. We want to taste your dishes." Bufang was unfazed while facing the countless complaints by the crowd. "I'll say it again. Today's business hours is over. If you want to eat, come early tomorrow. Oh, and please don't make a racket," Bufang expressionlessly said. Behind him, Whitey's mechanical eyes were shining red as they locked on the people who were clamoring. Immediately, these people went silent as if they were being strangled. With Whitey keeping watch, they could only swallow their anger and resentfully leave while thinking about how to report to their masters. Joe Rouge felt as if a countless amount of invisible arrows had pierced his chest. Damn it, business hours is over again? Could you not be so punctual? Owner Bu, I'll pay 5 times the price. I want to order. Unwilling to give up, Joe Rouge tried to persuade Bufang. I refuse. You've already tried to tempt me the previous time, Bufang simply said. Rules are determined by humans. Owner Bu. 10 times. How about 10 times the price? Today, I definitely must try out your dishes, Joe Rouge gnashed his teeth and said while ominously glaring at Bufang. No. Bu Feng's heart was bleeding as he resentfully rejected Zhou Rouge. If you raise your offer once more, I will definitely beat you up. Zhou Rouge was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He coldly glanced at Bu Feng, then angrily snorted and stormed out of the store. Ouyang Zioi's face was filled with admiration as she looked at Bu Feng. She always thought that Bu Feng was a greedy person. She did not think that he would be so principled. Smelly boss, the way you rejected that sissy was so handsome. Ouyang Zioi gave him a thumbs up. Haha, Bu Feng expressionlessly smiled. On the next 2 days, Fang Fang's little store was always teeming with people. There were new customers arriving every day. Xushi and Great Secretariat Su would come every single day and were completely subdued by Bu Feng's food. On the other hand, the Zhou siblings and the third prince, Ji Changsu, did not appear during that time. Of course, Bu Feng was slightly surprised but did not pay any heed. And so, the third day arrived. It was also a very important day in the Imperial City. The #1 expert in the Imperial City, Great General Zhou Meng, was triumphantly returning after battling the clans outside the Empire borders. He was escorting the 6 leaders of the heterodox sect, Death Soul Palace, that he took as prisoners back to the Imperial City. That day, the Imperial City was filled with opportunities as the city gates were laid wide open. Chapter 35, and sealing the Jor of Ice Hard Jade Urn Wine. In the main street of the Imperial City, troops in armor were clearing the way and blocking the spectating crowd on both sides of the street. There were crowds of people gathered making a racket. The noise was so loud that it seemed that it was going to capsize the Imperial City. The people were all focusing their attention as they curiously and expectantly looked toward the city gate. As the icy cold autumn wind blew, the dead leaves on the main street of the Imperial City were blown into the air. Since the first group of soldiers entered the city, the mood of the Imperial City was somber. The spectating crowd was absolutely silent as hundreds of blood-red flags marched past. It was like a sea of blood as the flags fluttered in the wind. The troops in armor were marching in step, and every single step was filled with a chilly metallic sound as it resounded throughout the Imperial City. Within the troops, the leader was a middle-aged man riding a reddish-brown horse. His sharp gaze and handsome features gave off a commanding aura. This man was the #1 expert in the Light Wind Empire, the great General Zhou Meng, who was triumphantly returning after battling the sects. Within the long and narrow rank of troops, there were 6 steel prisoner carriages being escorted. The exterior of the cages were splattered with blood, that filled the air with a pungent smell. The carriages were being pulled by gigantic spirit beasts, and each step they took made the ground tremble. Even though the heads of the prisoners within the carriages were lowered and they were barely breathing, their identities were shockingly well known outside of the border. They were the 6 leaders of the heterodox sect, Death Soul Palace, and every single one of them was a 6th-grade battle emperor. Each of them used to be influential and eminent individuals but were now reduced to prisoners. The carriages were generating a lot of noise as the wheels rolled over the quartzite flooring of the Imperial City. The crowd was also loudly cheering after their initial silence. They were always enthusiastic toward soldiers that returned in triumph, and such a victory would definitely be celebrated. As a country became stronger, the citizens would be proud as well. This was the so-called patriotism. The hardened and disciplined troops were indifferent to the cheers of the crowd. They continued to orderly march toward their destination, the majestic palace. A tall platform was built at the gate of Heavenly Mystery Square, in front of the palace. Colorful flags were set up in the surrounding area and were fluttering in the autumn wind. The palace guards neatly surrounded the gate of Heavenly Mystery Square to ensure order. We welcomed the triumphant return of Great General Zhou. As the troops stepped into the gate of Heavenly Mystery, the sharp voice of a eunuch, accompanied with true energy, resounded throughout the entire city and could almost be heard in every nook and cranny. It was soon followed by another round of cheers. On the platform, an elderly man wearing a dragon robe was smiling. He gently looked at the homecoming troops and nodded from time to time. Not far from the elderly man, The crown prince, Ji Chenin, was leisurely standing there in his python robe. On his right was the heroic-looking King Yu, Ji Chengyu, and the third prince, Ji Chengsu. On the sides of the tall platform, the court officials were standing with their hands in a fist and palm salute. Below the platform, members of the Zhou family were excited as they watched the slow approach of the homecoming troops and were unable to suppress their joyful feelings. Zhou Meng took off his helmet and walked onto the tall platform. Then he stopped in front of the emperor, knelt down on one knee, then put his hands together in a fist and palm salute and said, "Your servant did not fail your majesty's orders. We eliminated over 10,000 members of the Death Soul Palace, killed hundreds of Death Soul Palace experts above 3rd grade battle maniac, captured 6 of their leaders alive, and triumphantly returned." Good. 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 My dear subject, you are truly the pillar of the Light Wind Empire. As long as you are around, my empire is safe. The Emperor Ji Qingfeng laughed and did not hesitate to give praises. Soon, a few rituals were neatly and tidily carried out. Everyone meticulously completed their jobs. The welcome ceremony has ended. We will now move to the Great Hall to enjoy the celebration feast. The sharp voice of the eunuch resounded throughout the city once more. Bu Feng opened his sleepy eyes. He woke up earlier than usual that day, mainly because he was woken up by the 2 shouts of a eunuch that came out of nowhere. After Bu Feng finished washing up, he went into the kitchen and started his daily cooking practice. He took a portion of his practice dishes and served it to the big black dog at the entrance. As he expressionlessly watched the big black dog gobble down the food, he suddenly had a strange feeling. He felt that he was treating the dog like it was a lord. After opening up to the store for business, Bu Feng yawned, grabbed a chair and sat down, then started to wait for customers to arrive. However, after an hour passed, the store was still deserted and without any customer. It was slightly unbelievable for a store that was teeming with customers in the past few days. There's something strange going on today. Why isn't there even a single customer? Normally, Fatty Jin and his fat army would have already finished eating and would be paying the bill by now. And the little Lilai did not turn up for work as well. Did the waitress and the diners disappear at the same time or something? Bu Feng was silent for a moment, then finally went into the kitchen. He suddenly remembered that Xiao Yi seemed to have mentioned that Zhou something was returning to the imperial city and that she needed to apply for leave. However, why were the customers missing as well? That was what Bu Feng was concerned about. The truth was that the customers who ate at his store were all people with status. To celebrate the triumphant homecoming of Zhou Meng, the emperor set up a celebration feast at the Great Hall and invited every renowned and influential person in the imperial city. As Fatty Jin and the rest had all gone to the palace to attend the celebration, it was natural that they were not at the store. Bu Feng opened up the environment simulation cupboard, then took out an earthen jar, that had half a human's height, and placed it in the middle of the kitchen. It takes 3 days for the wine to be completed, and it has been 3 days since I placed this jar into the cupboard. This ice heart jade urn wine should be ready. Bu Feng suddenly remembered that he was still brewing a jar of wine. He originally planned to take it out that night, but since there were no customers, he decided to take a look. Taking out 3 small earthen jars prepared by the system, he was ready to unseal the jar and filter the wine. In the same instant as he removed the cloth cover that was sealing the earthen jar, a burst of wine aroma gushed out of the jar and rushed into his face. After deeply inhaling the wine aroma, Bu Feng was slightly shaking as a soft redness appeared on his face. The aroma is rich but does not irritate the nose, and strong but not overwhelming. Bu Feng already had made an evaluation and was slightly joyous. Taking out a bamboo ladle prepared by the system, Bu Feng reached into the earthen jar and scooped out half a ladle of wine. The exterior of the ladle was verdant while the interior was a yellowish beige. The wine itself was as clear as water, without any impurities to be seen. As expected of the wine produced by the Magnificent 9 brewing method, the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine was true to its name and was as clear as the water found in deep ravines. Bu Fang brought the ladle closer to his nose and took a deep breath. The rich and thick wine aroma immediately filled his nasal cavities. Before he even drank a single sip of the wine, he was already salivating and slightly intoxicated. As he poured the wine from the ladle into a blue and white porcelain wine cup, the stream of wine was pristine and transparent, like top-quality wine. Bu Fang eagerly lifted up the wine cup and brought it to his lips. As the wine entered his mouth, it enveloped his tongue and instantly flowed down his throat. A cold feeling spread through his entire body, then in the next moment, it was like a raging fire was burning in his stomach. Just when the flames were going to overwhelm him, he felt a cold feeling reappearing once more. The heat and the cold were constantly alternating. What a fine wine! Bu Fang smacked his lips with his face filled with enjoyment. Even though he was not knowledgeable when it came to wine, it was the best wine that he had ever tasted. However, even though the taste was delicious, the after-effect was too strong. After all, with its complicated brewing process, it was natural that the after-effect would be strong. Suppressing the urge to continue drinking, Bu Fang filled up the 3 small earthen jars and covered them with cloth covers. After pasting a rectangular red paper with the character, "Ice," written on it, the work was finished. After especially keeping a jar of wine for himself, Bu Fang placed the earthen jar back into the environment simulation cupboard. He was holding the wine cup in his hands as he happily walked back to the front of the store, planning to slowly enjoy it on his own. However, when he left the kitchen, he discovered someone standing at the entrance. It was a man in black clothing with a black veiled bamboo hat and a long sword, wrapped in a rag, on his back. A hoarse voice came out of the man's mouth, with a trace of yearning. "Shop owner, do you have any fine wine in here?"